How to embrace risks. Risks are scary. They have consequences. We don't know what the outcomes are. We can't really predict. We can kind of predict, but it's very volatile and things don't typically work out the way we expect them to. Sometimes they're worse. Sometimes they're not as bad. Risks are scary because they're unknown. We don't know what their outcome will be. And they can turn out well for us, like we can win the lottery. But at the same time, we could really dig ourselves into a deep hole that is hard to get out of. So risks are very difficult to wrap our heads around. Like, we don't really want to have to deal with risks often. And I think there's a lot of power to embracing them, to realizing that yes, they are hard. Yes, they might fail. Yes, things might not work out. And that's okay, right? And I hope that some of the principles in this video will help you to realize that it is okay to take risks. It's okay to lose something and sacrifice something because the cost and the potential outcomes were worth it. So the first thing is to frame risks taking and the outcomes of risk as an epic story, right? Regardless of a good outcome or a bad outcome of taking the risk, it will create an epic story, right? If it's an epic fail, if the risk didn't work and you fail miserably, that's still an epic story that you'll get to tell somebody whenever you've overcome it. And if the risk pans out and it works out for you, obviously that's a great story that you can tell. So regardless of the outcome, regardless of how bad the risk plays out for you, you'll always come out on the other side victorious because you'll have an epic story. You'll have a story that you can relive and tell yourself and use as evidence to show that you are what you say you are, that you are capable of doing what you say you can. And so risks lead to more epic stories regardless of the outcome, right? The next thing, so that's an important reframe that you want to have. The next thing is to accept the fact that you have to face the risk anyway, because a lot of the risks that we try to avoid, that we try to push away, that we try to hide from are typically the risks that we will end up facing anyway in our lives, right? Because when you think about it from a psychological perspective, we have these risks that we try to avoid, and there's a reason why we're avoiding them. It's because they're so prominent. They're staring us in the eyes, right? They have so much influence over our lives. And so at some level, these risks are inevitable. It's inevitable that you will have to deal with these risks at some capacity. And so the way I like to think about it is you might as well face the risk now, right? There's never going to be a better time, a more opportune time to deal with the risk, because the older you get, the more responsibilities you take on. Like if you're building a family or you've got a career and you're invested into it, the more you have to lose. So each successive progression of your existence, the older you get, the more you have to lose. And so the best moment to take the risk is now, right? And the greatest moment was yesterday, right? So the best moment, the most optimized moment to do now or to take the risk would be now, right? So face it now so that if you do lose, it's not as bad as losing later down the line, right? Instead of burying it down and avoiding it and then having to face it later and suffering much heavier consequences, you face it now and deal with it in a way that makes a little more sense. You can actually wrap your arms around how to fix the potential consequences and damage, right? The next principle is to look it in the eyes now, right? To actually make the decision to do the risk, right? You have to first accept the fact that now is the best time to take the risk, and then you have to actually take the risk, right? A lot of people will look at the risk, they'll look at it in the eye, and they'll be like, this is scary, but I know that I need to do it. And then they just stay in this gray area, right? Floating around, never just taking the charge and going all in on the risk. And so this is huge, right? You need to be able to charge into battle without looking back. Like, just go all in on this risk, right? When you realize that this risk is worth it, it has potential upside, it has some consequences that you realize you're taking, but you understand that this risk is something that is so important to your life, it's so important to your development that you need to do it, and you actually do it. That is the key. You actually need to make the decision. You need to actually cash in and take the risk. Because most people kind of straddle the line between thinking they need to take a risk and then taking the risk. And as a result, they kind of half-ass it. They aren't fully invested. And as a result, it increases the likelihood. Whenever you're straddling the line, it increases the likelihood that bad outcomes will occur. So whenever you just go all in, when you just fully commit yourself to taking a risk, it increases the likelihood that you will receive a positive outcome because you're going all in. You're basically optimizing for a positive outcome. You're optimizing for less dire consequences. And then finally, the next principle, this one's my favorite, is to never look back, right? When you're committed, when you're in the trenches, when you're taking this risk, do not look back, because the moment you look back, it puts you into a place of potential hesitation. It makes you second guess yourself. It makes you want to consider backing out and going back to safety and in the comfort, right? But when you don't look back, when you never look back, when you just charge into battle and never look back, you're committing yourself, you're throwing yourself into this risk. And I think there's a lot of power to that. It makes you more prepared to deal with all the problems you might face, right? It prepares you to see the risk for what it is, no matter how scary it is. And it enables you to truly, fundamentally force the hand, to force an outcome. Because when you're so deeply immersed into an experience, into a certain risk, then as a human being, you are driven to survive, right? You want to survive, and so you'll optimize and you'll make decisions that help you to survive, that increase the likelihood that you'll make it out of this thing alive. And so that should give you a lot of comfort. It should give you a lot of comfort to realize that when you're fully into a risk and it feels scary and it feels dangerous, your intuition and your instinct will kick in, and you'll make better decisions and you'll make decisive decisions. And I truly hope that people start to embrace this idea, right? Embrace risks, because they're inevitable. We all have to deal with them. So you might as well try to have a more epic story, whether it's an epic failure or an epic success, right? Whether it's a victory or a loss, you'll still have an epic story, right? Realize that at some point you'll have to face this. You'll have to make the decision to face this thing. And then you need to take that next step and actually go and face it. Like, actually immerse yourself fully into this risk, and then never look back and never ever second guess or have any doubts of your decision. That is how you embrace risks. Goodbye.